Hello all, and welcome to the third installment of the show, Lovecraft in October. Over the month of October, we will be looking at Lovecraft's most significant works, where I will provide a brief synopsis of the story in addition to looking at some of the themes and techniques used in the story. This week, we will be looking at the story At the Mountains of Madness. This novella was written in the first quarter of 1931. However, when Lovecraft tried to get it published in Weird Tales that year, it was rejected primarily due to its length. Seriously, this is a long one. This was a hard pill to swallow for Lovecraft, and it remained in limbo for several years before it was eventually published in the February, March, and April issues of Astounding Stories in 1936. This story focuses on an Antarctic expedition which was inspired from Lovecraft's own interests in the Antarctic. He held this interest since childhood, and the story even makes references to real-life expeditions that have happened prior. As with previous videos, this will contain spoilers for the story, so proceed at your own caution. This story takes place over the course of 12 chapters. The story begins with the main character, William Dyers, explaining how he doesn't want to let word of this expedition get out and how he wants to deter any attempts to explore the Antarctic. He recalls to the group consisting of several people, but more notably Pabody, the resident engineer, Lake, the resident biologist, and Danforth, a grad student. After setting up, Lake decides to go with a small group to investigate a separate part of the continent. While exploring on his own, Lake discovers various strange rock samples and other fossils before coming across the most shocking and incredible find. These creatures described as having barrel-shaped bodies with 5 pipe regions, various tentacles and appendages, and leathery wings with star-shaped heads. These 12 were described as the Elder Things, as referenced from the Necronomicon, and there were 6 damaged and 6 perfectly preserved specimens. Lake dissects one of them and discovers that they are not quite animals, not quite plants, and they have several organs and body parts that suggest that they can live on land, underwater, and in the air. The rest of the crew lose contact with Lake. Worried for them, Dyers and Danforth travel out to find Lake. Eventually, they find the camp has been destroyed. Lake and his men have been torn apart, and several dogs were killed. 1 person and 1 dog was missing from the body count, and several supplies were gone without a trace. The damaged Elder Things were buried under star-shaped mounds, and the other 6 were gone. Dyers and Danforth decide to go back, but soon discover a hidden city, described as made up of sharp peaks, domes, and cubes everywhere. Deciding to explore it, they make a landing and begin to investigate. Even though the strange city is abandoned, they discover these great sculptures and pieces of art that convey the history of this strange race and city. Dyers interprets the history of these Elder Things arriving after the moon became a satellite. Upon arriving millions of years ago, they began to settle and colonize several locations on Earth using the help of these created creatures called Shoggoths. These Shoggoths were created to be slaves and nothing more, although they could also mimic creatures and morph at any time. Eventually, other creatures arrived on Earth, namely the star spawn of Cthulhu and a race of aliens called Migo. These races would struggle and engage in acts of war against each other until the Earth began to change, resulting in Cthulhu's city of R'lyeh sinking into the Pacific Ocean. Eventually, the Shoggoths began to show sentience, which resulted in conflict between the Shoggoths and the Elder Things. This would go on until the Elder Things needed to retreat. Due to the changing Earth, new mountains would sprout up, and Antarctica would become uninhabitable even for the Elder Things. Eventually, Dyers and Danforth came across a big tunnel. Within, they came across the remaining 6 dead Elder Things, which appeared to have been involved in some terrible struggle, and they found giant albino penguins, described as being 6 foot tall, purely white, with slits for eyes. As they kept exploring, they came across this terrible mass of tumors, eyes, and tentacles that was responsible for the death of the Elder Things. They came across the Shoggoth. The 2 ran through the caves in a desperate attempt to outrun the Shoggoth, and eventually they were able to escape on the airplane. Danforth saw something that shattered his sanity as they ran away, but he never disclosed what it was. As they flew out, Dyers hoped that he can stop people from exploring the dreaded continent to prevent people from discovering what they had seen. This story is such a great piece of fiction from Lovecraft, arguably his best work. Even though the plot is somewhat simple, basically only the explorers go to Antarctica, they find the city, which is referred to as Lang, and they escape, Lovecraft does an excellent job building up the mystery and inevitable horrors during the expedition. One thing that I think is really executed well is the fact that the story is based in reality. Even though the characters encounter a hidden city with elder beings, Lovecraft drops plenty of tidbits of real-world information that drive the point that this is all real. The fact that these terrible things exist in the world make it that much more terrifying, especially considering the implications of the existence of the city of Leng and the elder things. The fact that Lovecraft was well versed in Antarctic expeditions makes the story much more authentic. On the other hand, we also have a story that not only establishes a lot of new lore, but also ties together other aspects of the Cthulhu mythos. Previously, we had seen the existence of Cthulhu, R'lyeh, and the Deep Ones. However, At the Mountains of Madness ties Cthulhu and the Necronomicon together with the existence of the Elder Ones, while also throwing in the Migo, these fungal aliens from Pluto, and the Shoggoths in as well. But Lovecraft doesn't just throw these things together, he provides background for all of them as well. The story can also be seen as a bit of an origin story for the Earth and its relation to the Elder Gods, seeing as how the art and sculptures in the lost city of Leng provide this epic story of how the Elder Ones came to be and their struggles against the other creatures that exist in the great beyond, and how things have changed. The combination of scientific accuracy and realism, along with the fantastic description of the Cthulhu mythos, results in a story that is refreshingly horrifying, with its implications that life as we know it could have been an accidental occurrence through the actions and tests of these curious elder things, and that biology and science as we know it could totally be completely shattered by their own existence. I also really like how the elder things are presented. They are curious, industrious, and progressive. Their conflicts with the other elder factions show that they are willing to fight amongst other gods, and the Shoggoth uprisings seemingly draw parallels to slave uprisings that have occurred in Earth's lifetime. By the end, Dyers paints these things as the good guys, and it makes you think that if these elder things have more in common with humans than originally thought. The way Lovecraft also paints the elder things' decline is also really interesting. Here we have these super advanced creatures capable of intergalactic travel and technology, and who knows what they're capable of. But over the course of millions of years, after warring with other factions and warring with their own slaves, they have come to lose that technology. And at a certain point, Lovecraft describes that they can no longer travel out of the Earth because they no longer have that technology disposable to them. Lovecraft was a genius for using Antarctica as the setting for this novel. During the 1920s and 30s, there were plenty of expeditions to explore the southern continent. Since Lovecraft loves writing about the unknown and unthinkable, it was a really good step to frame the Earth, something that we have been living on for millions and millions of years, as being the host to something totally otherworldly and much more sinister. Even though this is a real place on Earth, it remains as alien and uninhabitable as some other planet or dimension. This setting would prove to be popular for other works of fiction, most notably the 1982 film The Thing, which also deals with the horror that exists deep within the ice. And the story would also bring about the concept of ancient astronauts, that is, creatures that come from other locations or planets that have come to Earth millions and millions of years before humanity as we know it has come to be. The final climax of the story was incredible. It was simple. Two brave explorers came across a Shoggoth and ran away. Yet, Lovecraft writes this with such skill, the tension maintains its pacing throughout the entire part. You really feel like you are desperately running away from this awful horror that is trailing you like a subway train, never looking back to gaze into its awful existence. Everything up to that point was a very slow burn, but it really paid off for the escape through the caves, and it drives this sense of danger and urgency through that entire section. This was my first time reading the story, and I always knew it was essential, so I made sure to read it for the series. And I've got to say, I think this may be the best story I have read from Lovecraft. Everything is so compact, and while the plot is relatively simple, it interlays complex background within it, which results in Lovecraft creating this terrifying universe within our own self-contained island of ignorance, and he does it really well. Some parts are really dense, and I never felt bogged down though. My favorite part of the story was the lore about the Elder Ones and their time on Earth. It just seems so epic and bigger than reality. I also really love how well connected this is with the rest of the Cthulhu mythos, essentially creating an origin story for the Earth. The story has so much to it, and I think reading it for a second time would result in picking up missed details from my first time around. I definitely think this is worth a second read through, and I definitely felt the terror and danger throughout the entire story. Well, that was my review for Lovecraft's story, At the Mountains of Madness. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did. If you liked the video, be sure to comment below and subscribe. I plan on releasing another video next week, so be on the lookout for that. I will see you all next time.